Improve your English with powerful stories. Follow the subtitles, practice your listening, and dive into emotional journeys. Let's begin.
I never thought a single decision could change everything. But that night, at 11:47 p.m., I made a choice that would haunt me forever. It was raining, the kind of rain that feels like the sky is crying. I was walking home from my shift at the diner, my jacket soaked, my shoes squelching with every step. The streets were empty, the kind of empty that makes you feel like you're the last person on earth. And then I saw it. There, on the sidewalk, glinting under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, was a key. But this wasn't just any key. It was strange, almost otherworldly. It glowed faintly, a soft golden light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. I crouched down to pick it up, and the moment my fingers touched it, a shiver ran down my spine. It was warm, like it had been waiting for me. I turned it over in my hand, examining the intricate carvings on its surface. Symbols I didn't recognize, swirling patterns that seemed to move if I stared at them too long. And then, as if on cue, the streetlight above me buzzed and went out. I should have left it there. I should have walked away. But something inside me, call it curiosity, call it fate, told me to keep it. That was my first mistake. My name's Alex. Just Alex. No fancy last name, no dramatic backstory, just a 27-year-old guy trying to make ends meet in a town so small it doesn't even have a traffic light. Maplewood, they call it. A place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing exciting ever happens. Or at least, that's what I used to think. I work at Joe's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee's always a little too bitter and the regulars always have something to complain about. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Most days, I'm just flipping burgers and wiping down tables, dreaming of something bigger. Something more. But let's be real, Maplewood isn't exactly the land of opportunity. That night, after my shift, I was tired. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you're moving through molasses. The rain didn't help. It was coming down hard, and all I wanted was to get home, kick off my wet shoes, and collapse on the couch. But then I found the key. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, who would? It was just a key, right? Sure, it looked weird, and yeah, it glowed, but maybe it was some kind of prank. Kids these days have all kinds of gadgets, right? I shoved it into my pocket and kept walking, the weight of it pressing against my leg like a secret I wasn't ready to tell. When I got home, I tossed the key onto my kitchen counter and forgot about it. Or at least, I tried to. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Something had changed. I just didn't know how much. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my alarm blaring. I groaned, slapped it off, and dragged myself out of bed. The key was still on the counter where I'd left it, its faint glow now dull in the daylight. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. The carvings were still there, still swirling, still impossible to ignore. Weird, I muttered, tossing it into the drawer with my spare change and old receipts. I didn't have time for mysteries. I had work. But as the day went on, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I handed a customer their coffee or wiped down a table, my mind kept drifting back to that key. What was it for? Why did it feel so alive? By the time my shift ended, I was itching to get home. I practically ran through the rain, my jacket pulled tight around me. When I got there, I went straight to the drawer and pulled out the key. It was glowing again, brighter now, like it was excited to see me. And then it happened. The key started to vibrate in my hand, a low hum that grew louder and louder. I tried to drop it, but it was like it was glued to my skin. The symbols on its surface began to move, twisting and shifting like they were alive. And then, in a flash of light, an image appeared in my mind. An abandoned house. On the edge of town. I'd seen it before, but I'd never paid it much attention. Until now. The key wasn't just a key. It was a map. And it was leading me somewhere. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The image of the abandoned house burned in my mind, and the key wouldn't stop glowing. It was alive, like it was pulling me toward something. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I was going to find that house. I grabbed my jacket, shoved the key into my pocket, and headed out. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy, like the world was holding its breath. The house wasn't far, just a 20-minute walk from my apartment, but every step felt like a mile. My heart pounded in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When I finally got there, the house looked even creepier than I remembered. It was old, with peeling paint and broken windows, and the front yard was overgrown with weeds. The kind of place kids dare each other to go into on Halloween. I hesitated at the gate, my hand gripping the key so tight it almost hurt. "This is crazy," I muttered to myself. But something inside me, something I couldn't explain, told me to keep going. I pushed open the gate, the hinges squeaking like they hadn't been touched in years. The key in my pocket grew warmer, its glow seeping through the fabric of my jeans. I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under my weight, and reached for the door. It was locked, of course. But the key was already in my hand, like it knew what to do. I slid it into the lock, and with a soft click, the door swung open. The inside of the house was dark, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the shadows. The place was a mess, broken furniture, torn wallpaper, and floors covered in debris. But there, in the middle of the room, was something that made my blood run cold. A journal. It was sitting on a small table, like it had been waiting for me. And on the cover, in bold, handwritten letters, was my name. Alex. I stared at the journal, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. My name. My actual name. How was that even possible? I reached for it, my hand trembling, and flipped it open. The pages were filled with handwriting, my handwriting. But I'd never seen this journal before in my life. The first entry was dated exactly 1 year ago. If you're reading this, it means you found the key. Don't panic. Well, okay, maybe panic a little. But listen carefully, this is important. You have 24 hours to stop it. Stop what? My eyes scanned the page, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The journal went on to describe a disaster, a fire that would destroy half the town. According to the entry, it would start tonight at midnight. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. There were sketches of buildings, maps of the town, and detailed notes about what would happen and when. It was like a blueprint for chaos. And then I saw it. A drawing of the key. Beneath it, a single line of text: the key is the only way to stop it. But be careful, it's not just a tool. It's a test. A test? What did that even mean? I slammed the journal shut, my mind racing. This had to be a joke, right? Some kind of elaborate prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The key in my pocket was proof of that. I looked around the room, the shadows suddenly feeling darker, heavier. The air was thick with the smell of dust and something else, something metallic, like blood. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I nearly dropped it. It was a text from my best friend, Sam. "Hey, you okay? You've been acting weird all day." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should I tell her? Would she even believe me? Before I could decide, the journal slipped from my hands and fell to the floor. It landed open, and a single photograph slid out. I picked it up, my stomach twisting into knots. It was a picture of me. Standing in front of this house. But I'd never been here before. I couldn't breathe. The photo in my hand felt like it was burning, like it was alive. How could this be? How could there be a picture of me in a place I'd never been? I flipped it over, hoping for some kind of explanation, but the back was blank. No date, no note, nothing. Just me, standing in front of this house, looking different. Older. Wiser. Like I'd seen things I couldn't unsee. The key in my pocket pulsed, pulling me back to the present. I didn't have time to figure this out. According to the journal, the fire would start at midnight, and I had less than 12 hours to stop it. I grabbed the journal and ran out of the house, the key's glow lighting my way. The streets were empty, the town eerily quiet. It felt like the calm before a storm. I didn't know where to start, but the journal did. The next page had a map of the town with a red circle around an old warehouse near the river. Beneath it, a note, "This is where it begins. Stop it before it spreads." I didn't question it. I couldn't. I just ran. By the time I reached the warehouse, my legs were burning, and my lungs felt like they were on fire. The place looked abandoned, just like the house, but I could see light flickering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The key was vibrating now, its hum growing louder with every step. I pushed open the door, the hinges screeching in protest, and stepped inside. The room was filled with stacks of old newspapers, wooden crates, and gasoline. Lots of gasoline. And in the middle of it all, a man in a dark hoodie was pouring more fuel onto the floor. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty space. The man froze, then turned to face me. I couldn't see his face under the hood, but I could feel his eyes on me, cold and calculating. "You're too late," he said, his voice low and gravelly. And then he struck a match. The match hit the floor, and the room exploded into flames. I didn't think. I just moved. I lunged at the man, tackling him to the ground. We rolled across the floor, the heat of the fire searing my skin. The key in my pocket burned like a brand, its glow so bright it lit up the room. "You don't understand," the man shouted, struggling against me. "This has to happen. It's the only way." "The only way to what?" I yelled back, pinning him down. But he didn't answer. With a sudden burst of strength, he shoved me off and disappeared into the flames. I tried to follow, but the fire was too intense. I had to get out. I stumbled to my feet, clutching the journal to my chest, and ran for the door. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking me, but I kept going. I burst outside just as the roof collapsed, the sound of crashing wood and roaring flames filling the air. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath, my clothes singed and my hands trembling. The warehouse was gone, reduced to a pile of burning rubble. But the town was safe. I'd stopped it. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the flames, but eventually, the sound of sirens pulled me back to reality. Fire trucks, police cars, they all arrived too late. By the time they got there, the fire had burned itself out. I slipped away before anyone could ask questions. I didn't have answers, not really. All I had was the journal, the key, and a million questions swirling in my head. When I got home, I placed the key on the counter and stared at it. It was dull now, its glow faded, like it had done its job. But what was its job? And who was that man? Why did he think the fire had to happen? I didn't know. And maybe I never would. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The key, the journal, the house, they were all connected. And somehow, I was part of it. I just didn't know how yet. A week passed, and life went back to normal. Or at least, as normal as it could be after what happened. The fire was all anyone could talk about, but no one suspected me. To them, it was just a tragic accident. But I knew better. I kept the key and the journal hidden in a drawer, but I couldn't stop thinking about them. Every night, I'd take them out and study them, hoping to find some clue I'd missed. The journal was filled with entries I hadn't read yet, pages and pages of notes about events that hadn't happened, or maybe hadn't happened yet. And then there was the key. It hadn't glowed since that night, but it still felt alive. Like it was waiting for something. Tonight, as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the key, I noticed something I hadn't before. One of the carvings on its surface had changed. It was subtle, but it was there, a new symbol, one that hadn't been there before. I ran my finger over it, and the key pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. That's when I heard it. A knock at the door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was late, too late for visitors. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. I grabbed the key and walked to the door, my heart pounding. I didn't know who, or what, was on the other side, but I had a feeling my life was about to change all over again. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Standing there was a woman I'd never seen before. She looked tired, her clothes worn, but her eyes were sharp, focused. And in her hand, she held a key. Just like mine.
Thank you so much for joining me today and practicing your English with this powerful story. I hope it inspired you and reminded you of the strength we all have to overcome challenges. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear this story. Your support means the world to me. Remember, every story has the power to change us. Keep practicing your English, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and keep learning.